Consumers want to know the facts about the products they buy, but America's agricultural landscape is not easy to navigate. Between different companies, scientific advancement, government regulations, advertisement campaigns, and an unhealthy amount of myth and misconception, anyone will be hard-pressed to make sense of it. That's where Real Ag comes in. Kyle Bauer and the Real Ag crew bring you truthful, unbiased information about real agricultural concerns. From the producers who make your food, to the store where you buy the final product, and everything in between. This is Real Ag. Now, here's your host, Kyle Bauer.
The relationship between humans and sheep was already old when the Bible was written. But a lot has changed for shepherds since those days. Sheep is our topic today on Real Ag.
Production of Real Ag is made possible by
Servitech has been helping producers across the Midwest make the planet more productive since 1975. We are proud sponsors of Real Ag, helping tell the story of how your food makes it to your plate.
The Kansas Soybean Commission, the Soybean Checkoff, progress powered by farmers.
Humans have kept sheep for a very long time.
Well, they're an old animal that I think came out of the Mideast.
Sheep come from all around the world. Africa, Asia, Europe, North America, South America. There are sheep on every continent, I do believe, except for Antarctica, and there may even be sheep there.
Well, we domesticated sheep about 10,000 years ago, and when you start looking at wool production, that people started spinning and weaving wool at about 3,500 BC or so. In the late 1400s, early 1500s, as we started to see exploration come to the New World, a lot of that was funded by wool because we were spinning wool, we were trading wool. In fact, wool was one of the first internationally traded commodities. And so it funded a lot of the exploration trips, you know, Columbus and Cortez and those coming to the New World. Well, then in the 16th, 17th century, you know, we've got the colonies over here and they've already started to establish, and England has gotten upset with our colonists and said, you know, you can't make money from sheep or wool exportation, and so that kind of made the settlers mad, and it ended up such that they actually started asking, well, they made a law in 1664 or something like that, that required their youth to learn to spin and weave. And they smuggled or came up with 10,000 head of sheep at some point in time. And that really became one of the issues that started the American Revolution. You know, we continued to make England mad with our production of wool, and then with Stamp Act on top of that and things, then that all led to the Revolutionary War. As we continue to look at just kind of the historical presence and movement of sheep, you know, we just started to see more and more sheep grown here in the U.S. and more breeds change. You know, while we have a foundation of just a handful of breeds, now we have over 40 different breeds in the U.S. And so we've seen some of those that were actually developed here in the United States by the U.S. Sheep Experiment Station. And so we've tried to develop some of these breeds to meet our producers' needs and consumer needs as well. So that kind of in a nutshell is our history.
Before we go any further, let's go over some important terms.
The terms for sheep can be broken into two different areas. You've got breeding stock and you've got marketable meat animals.
A lamb is any sheep under 1 year of age. A ewe lamb is a female sheep that can be from under 1 year of age all the way till she is a mature ewe at her terminal age.
And in the breeding stock side, the male sheep or lamb at the time are either called a buck, a ram, or at sometimes they can be called stags. And then on the marketable side, you can have wethers or ewes.
A wether is a non-intact male sheep, castrated ram that is typically put on feed, and is anything can be from under 1 year of age to over 1 year of age, but they are a wether. That is the terminology there. Just like a steer is a castrated bull, a wether is a castrated ram.
There are two main products that come from sheep, meat and wool. Let's talk about wool first.
Wool is a natural fiber that's produced by the sheep, and different sheep grow different qualities of wool. We talk about a Rambouillet growing a real high quality fleece, or a real high quality fine wool, where a Lincoln may be a real coarse, longer wool that's not used for suits or apparel.
There are different grades which deals with the tightness of the fibers that's in the wool, and they call that thread count, spinning count, various things. There's different grades from coarseness of coarse and fine wools, and staple length. That's the length of the fleece that comes off the sheep.
Typically when we talk about harvesting wool, we're talking about shearing is the term that we would use, and most of that is done in the early spring, depending on the area of the country that you go to.
And until recent history, there was a government payment that helped the wool producers. And that's gone away now. You'll still see the Western Range quite concerned about wool, but the farm flocks don't worry so much about it.
When we talk about a individual, the product that is shorn from one sheep would be a fleece, is the terminology that we would use there.
Yes, we have to shear the sheep. If the sheep are not shorn, it is bad on their fleece. It can impact their overall health. During the summer, they would just be little hot fuzz balls out there running around, would be the best way to put it. But if we don't shear, they also can come down with fly strike and various things like that, where the fly gets in underneath the wool and lays its eggs in the skin of the sheep. Where cattle and other livestock shed their hair, sheep do not shed their wool.
But as you look at shearing as a whole, there's not it's a trade that is kind of a lost art to a certain degree. It's oftentimes talked about that the amount of energy expelled one day shearing is somewhat equivalent to running a marathon, and so it's work, and unfortunately we just don't have as many shearers out there as we'd like to have. Lanolin is the byproduct of wool, and it's one of those that you see in a lot of different cosmetics. When you touch wool and you take your hands off of it, you can immediately feel that kind of oily or greasy feeling, and that is the lanolin that's in that wool. It's naturally produced by the sheep, and it actually aids in a lot of healing. And when we talked about shearing these animals, oftentimes we'll have a shearer that might nick that animal or cut that animal just a little bit. That's no worse than a man nicking himself when he's shaving. That typically is healed up in just 3 or 4 days, maybe a week at most, but it's that lanolin that is helping that heal. It's keeping that tissue soft and aids in the healing process. When we see it in lotions and other cosmetics, it's a moisturizer, and it just is used. Now, it's not in the same state that we see it when you put your hands on that raw wool, or when you touch that fleece, it's in its raw or grease state. And so that wool then goes through a manufacturing process where it's scoured or washed, and that dirt and grease and everything comes out. The wool goes on and is dried and comes out snow white. And the grease or the lanolin is actually separated from the water and then purified and cleansed, and then goes on into the different cosmetic industries and other industries that might use lanolin.
Let's talk about the meat side of the industry.
As we look at our meat side of our industry, that part is somewhat confusing, I think. We are one of the few industries that has named our product after our offspring. And that doesn't really set a very good tone for those that are interested in going out and eating lamb.
Well, lamb is a very good meat. It's always been kind of a cultural status is what I I see it as. Lamb is very nutritious. It is loaded with a lot of the essential minerals, you know, some of the trace minerals that are essential to human beings. And the taste, you know, it's a developed taste. And it's also becoming more popular on the east and west coast. In the Midwest, we're just not used to it. I'm here to tell you that we eat lamb here. We eat beef, we eat pork in our family, and we'd eat them all just the same. We prefer good lamb if we can have good lamb, but it must be prepared right. It's just like anything else. You need to have the knowledge of preparation, but it's good for those that want a package of minerals there for them. It's also it is high in some of the fats, but it's also high in the good fats rather than the bad fats. So
it's just an odd taste for most U.S. consumers to get used to. The story behind that, to my knowledge, is that during the World War II, a lot of our U.S. servicemen were fed mutton, and that was their viewpoint on lamb, was that it tasted like mutton.
Part of our consumption of lamb or mutton was heavily influenced by our World War II veterans. And when you look back at World War II, those men and women were fed canned mutton rations. And mutton is bad enough as itself for some, just because it has the stronger flavor. But you can that, and you give that to a gentleman that's fighting for our freedom, you know, on a daily basis. He gets a little bit tired of that. He comes back home, and you know, his wife says, "Well, could I fix some lamb tonight?" No, we've had plenty of that. But lamb is the good stuff. Lamb isn't mutton. Lamb is one of those that is going to be or one of those meats that is going to be very tender. It will have a somewhat mild flavor, but it's a unique flavor in and of itself. While mutton is, because it's from an older animal, is going to be more of a strong or intense flavor. And when you start looking at different ethnicities, some individuals prefer that. As Americans, you know, we've eaten so much meat that is corn-fed or grain-fed that that really contributes to a mild flavor, where a grass-fed type of an animal may be more of an intense flavor than some of the others. And so I think we're a bit spoiled in terms of our taste buds, in that we get to season it the way we want. But in all actuality, lamb is just a delight to eat. You know, it's not one of those meats, though, that you can prepare quickly. I mean, it takes a little bit of time, it takes a little bit of finesse, but quality, I mean, a well-prepared lamb dish is one of the best you'll ever eat.
What does it take to raise sheep?
When we discuss what animals eat and specifically what do sheep eat, sheep are ruminant animals just like a cow or a goat or a deer. They are a herbivore strictly, and when we look at what they're designed to eat, obviously they're designed to go out and forage and turn that green stuff that we can't convert to meat into meat. And so we have a very efficient animal that can do that well.
sheep prefer forbs, which are broadleaf plants out in native grasses. That would be their first choice if they're out on range. They'd eat forbs, and then they would go to grasses, and then they would go to browse very last, which are the shrubs, the thickets, the plum brush. If you want to clean up a pasture, if you want to clean up some various things, turn a bunch of sheep out after your cattle or with your cattle. We do that around here as well. But they will clean up the pigweeds, the ironweed. They won't touch the thistles that much, but they will clean up a bunch of those obnoxious broadleaves that are out in your pasture. And you can stock them one sheep per cow unit and not damage your grazing impact if you're grazing with your cattle.
So this actually makes sheep very well, sheep, goats, and cattle very good for multi-species grazing. And so as we look at how we mix those animals, we can really benefit our land and ultimately our bottom line and our production by diversifying our operation and including sheep in our sheep with other species. Now, that's what we would expect to see in a range type operation. But as you know, we have a large number of geographical regions throughout the United States. And so when you look at the upper Midwest and Kansas and Iowa and Nebraska that produces so many grains, cereal grains, Indiana, all of this area, those sheep are oftentimes fed grain.
Oh, well, today I fed them sorghum silage, I fed them soybean straw that was ground, I fed them alfalfa, and I fed them corn.
Sheep are one of those that we still have to focus on fencing. And it's fencing them in, but also trying to somewhat fence predators out as well.
We can throw up 3 or 4 hot wire. It takes 3 wires on a hot wire fence to keep lambs in most times.
With the sheepdogs, my best explanation for how they actually work is canines are aggressive to others within their territory. At times they will actually dispose of predators for you. Guard dogs are typically raised in and around sheep, so they're very comfortable and they become one of the flock in certain terms. Typically they are not super human friendly, but that's the way we want them because we don't want guard dogs running off with somebody else. If they came up to your vehicle on the side of the road, they wouldn't be able to do their job.
The dogs seem to work. They do not group up and go off on their own. They stay separated. They range out. They'll range in a mile radius around the homestead here, but when they're out on pasture, they'll range in a 2-mile radius around that flock. You may not see them when you go and check a windmill first thing in the morning, but if you come back in the evening, they will be there. And we do feed them out on pasture. We go out there every day and have to feed them. So it is a 24/7 job to make sure that our investment is protected and that the welfare of our livestock is protected.
On a typical day during lambing season, starts usually before the sun's up, of course. And during lambing season, it's usually 2 hours check. You go out and check the ewes to see if any have lambed, and if they have, you bring them into the lambing barn in the jugs, and then you usually top off feed and water that morning, and then you keep an eye on the ewes and the lambs, always either checking for sicks or just making sure that total care is there. Then as the day goes on, you'll bring a few more in and you'll feed the actual bunks or you'll feed the big groups after mixing feed and stuff. And of course, you've got to keep, usually during that time of year, water available because it's usually cold during that time of year. I think time would be a major factor and labor availability. It's a very labor-intense system and industry. A lot of it's footwork and on foot, and there's just not a whole lot of technology developed for the sheep industry currently.
You're not very likely to be injured with sheep. There's still injuries. Us kids I've had a bloody nose more than once from a ewe jumping up out of a working area. And I've had a sister had a broken arm. There are some safety concerns, but there's less than, you aren't going to get kicked like you will with cattle. Sheep do not have that same reflex that cattle have. It's also nice to be able to work towards a project where we can implement more automation. The sheep industry has been very under-automated. We use a feed mixer and deliver rations to the bunk. We also use EID tags, electronic identification tags, in our sheep to monitor their progress and track them along. But trying to automate some of these things and move the sheep industry forward into the current times rather than doing everything the way they have been done.
There are many different kinds of sheep.
Oh, there's all kinds of different breeds of sheep.
Delanes or Rambouillets, some Targhee breeds, and then your medium wools, Columbias, Dorsets, Hampshires, South Downs, Suffolks, and then your coarse or long wool breeds, which become your Lincolns, and your Navajo Churros,
Targhee, Polypay, Dorset Cross,
the Katahdin, the Dorper, the White Dorper, St. Croix. And we think about how did we get that many breeds? I mean, after all, we all came from one type of individual, but there's so many people that look different. At the same time, we do that in sheep. You know, we had a breed of sheep and we've all seemed to evolve from that point. And so when we look at developing a breed of any species, breed of sheep in particular, we'll take 2 different or 3 different breeds, maybe even 4, and create a crossbred or a composite of all these breeds. And what we're trying to do at that point is identify the strengths that we have in different breeds, bring them together. And currently, as we talked about at the United States Department of Agriculture Meat Animal Research Center in Clay Center, Nebraska, they've recently developed a sheep that it's a composite that they're calling the Easy Care. This is made up of a Romanoff, White Dorper, and a Katahdin. What they're trying to do is make that animal as low maintenance as possible, but still have as many lambs. And so the Romanoff is a breed that is commonly known for having multiples, 3 to 5 offspring. And so they're going to utilize those traits in that animal to bring into this composite. The Katahdin is a sheep that is known for being fairly tolerant of parasites and good-footed. They maintain themselves well and they don't grow any wool. They're a hair sheep. And so they're going to bring those traits to the table. And then you have the White Dorper that again is more of a shedding sheep. They'll grow wool, but White Dorper has really good maternal traits as well as the Katahdin. And those are an animal that are going to shed their wool, but they also have really high quality carcasses. So we're bringing all of these strengths together and we're mating those animals, and we came up with, Dr. Craig Lymaster up there, came up with the best cross in taking a half Romanoff, quarter White Dorper, quarter Katahdin, putting them together and coming up with this Easy Care. So we're trying to put all of those strengths into one animal, and that's a maternal animal. So we developed that, that breed was developed for a maternal line. Then we'll take those and then crossbreed those with other breeds that are known more for meat production, and so you get that kind of half-half benefit out of it.
What is the future of sheep?
The future in the sheep industry is very interesting. We currently are at a point where there's less and less people becoming involved. Some of the larger operations are relying on certain types of government ground to run their lambs and ewes on. So we need to look in my opinion is we need to look in a new direction of what we need to do with the sheep industry.
The majority of our sheep operations are still less than 100 head. With that being said, we still see, as we do in agriculture and just about every aspect of agriculture, that our population of those individuals that are still raising livestock or participating heavily in ag is getting older. And we don't have as many young people that have continued to stay in the industry. And that's, a real shame, because ultimately that's where our food source is going to lie for the future. At the same time, when we look at profitability of sheep, right now we're probably in as good a time as we've ever been.
That wraps up this episode of Real Ag. Remember, you can see every episode of this series by going to SmokyHillsTV.org. Until next time, I'm Kyle Bauer, and this has been Real Ag.
Production of Real Ag is made possible by
Servitech has been helping producers across the Midwest make the planet more productive since 1975. We are proud sponsors of Real Ag, helping tell the story of how your food makes it to your plate.
The Kansas Soybean Commission, the Soybean Checkoff, progress powered by farmers.